Hello and welcome. Thank you for registering for our Technician Class License class that's coming up November 1st and 2nd by the Amateur Radio Club at the University of Washington. I'm one of the instructors. There's about a half dozen of us, but I'm Randy, Kilo Juliet 7, Whiskey Lima Tango. These slides are just a brief introduction to the mechanics of the class and some things you should do in advance. I sent this around in email, but please remember to get your FRN, your FCC registration number in advance as soon as the government reopens. That will be required to take the exam. Also, you should register for the exam itself at this link. That requires a separate registration. We encourage you to do that and to take the exam. We think you'll be ready to pass it. The class itself is free, but there is a $15 fee for the exam. And if you pass the exam, one or more exams, there's a $35 fee to the FCC to obtain the license, which is billed later. For the $15 fee, please bring a cash or a check to the exam. If you want to also register for the general exam or even the amateur extra exam, if you pass the technician, you would then be allowed to go on and take the next level exam. A bit about the mechanics. Every day we'll be meeting, or each day from 8:30 to 5, but try to get in a bit early. Sometime by 8:30 we'll have coffee and pastries there, and we'd like to start promptly at 8:30 since we have a lot of material to cover. We'll be meeting in the Fishery Sciences building down on Boat Street. We have only about a half hour allocated for lunch, so you might want to bring something along for that. And then Sunday we'll be quitting early at around 3 p.m. to do the exam. Exam itself doesn't take that long, but there'll be a lot of people taking it, and it takes some time to grade them and make sure there's time for people to take higher level exams as well. So our basic goal and approach to this class is to get you to pass the technician license exam in this one weekend. The exam itself is only 35 questions, but they're chosen from a pool of 412 questions, and we'll go through a lot of those questions in the class just to get you familiar with them. You only have to pass 26 out of 35 to pass the exam. And we're going to kind of focus, we don't have time to explain all the details, so we'll focus on giving you a bit of context and explanation and some mnemonics to help you get through the exam quickly. We really think that the best way to learn about ham radio is to get your license, get a radio, and then join a club or an organization or meet other people who are in the hobby and dive into it, and that's when you really start learning. So the goal here is to get you to that stage. Some of the topics we'll be covering Saturday. We'll cover a lot of the sort of physics engineering aspects of radios and signals, electric components, resistors, capacitors, inductors. You need to understand a bit to understand how a radio tunes, for example. Something about propagation of radio waves and antennas and the feed lines that connect them to radios, and about safety, electrical safety and the electromagnetic waves, also physical safety. Sunday, we'll talk a bit more about equipment in general, some other tools that you might want to use beyond just the basic radio and antenna. Talk about communicating with other hams, using repeaters, getting onto nets, what that's all about. We'll give you an introduction to some of our local clubs and organizations that we encourage you to get involved with, and talk about some of the licensing and operating regulations that you need to know in order to have an FCC license, and then do the exam itself. We've mentioned this class this webpage, hamstudy.org. I think it's really a good way to prepare and start getting familiar with some of the concepts that we'll be talking about in more details. Let me switch to the website itself. If you go to the main hamstudy.org site, there's some general information, and then there's information about each of the 3 exams. So if we go to the technician exam, there are different modes. You can either just read through the questions and see all the correct answers as well as the distractors, the wrong answers. If we click on that, notice, by the way, that there are like 10 different sections, and within each section there are several different sub-elements, and the way the exam is structured, there's typically always 1 or 2 questions from each sub-element so that you get a wide exam that covers everything. So if you look through these questions, you see the question and the correct answer is highlighted in green. If you want some more information about why that's the correct answer, you can click on the corner, and it often tells you a bit about that. In some cases, it just gives you a sort of silly mnemonic for memorizing the correct answer, which may or may not be useful, but often you get some good information or hints there. If we go back to study mode, This gives you questions one at a time in some random order, and you get to read the question and then say what you think the correct answer is. So if we think the correct answer is, well, let me say this one, for example, which I happen to know is wrong, it crosses it out, but lets you try again. So we might try this one and see that it's right. Again, you can go up here and get some explanation about it. You can also just click I don't know if you want it to show you the right answer. And then practice test mode, it actually constructs a test of 35 questions chosen from all the different sub-elements, and you have to go through and answer each of the questions, and then at the very end, down at the bottom, you can have it grade the exam and tell you if you would have passed or not. So all of these modes are useful for learning some more about this material and getting familiar with some of these concepts before you come into the class. So we've prepared 2 other videos that I encourage you to watch in advance. Video 2 is just kind of an overview of amateur radio and some of the rules and regulations and how ham radio differs from other kinds of radio like walkie-talkies and FRS, family radio service, CB radio, things like that. And then video 3 gets into some of the terminology and basic concepts, very quick overview of a lot of things that are in the 2-day class, just to get you kind of better prepared to go through some of the things on ham study and to start thinking about some of these concepts. So look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks, and please spend a little time on hamstudy.org if you can in the meantime.